She only wanted to borrow her sister's dress for one reckless night, but when a federal judge mistook her for someone else, she stepped into a world of forbidden desire and deadly secrets. Emma Rodriguez stood before the mirror, her breath shallow, her heart racing faster than it had any right to. The reflection staring back at her looked like a stranger. The soft, bookish girl who usually hid beneath bulky sweaters and messy buns was gone. In her place was a woman in crimson silk, every curve revealed in a way that made her blush to look at herself. Sophia's red dress clung like a second skin, the neckline dipping lower than Emma had ever dared. Her dark hair, usually pulled back for long study nights, tumbled loose over her shoulders. A sweep of eyeliner made her brown eyes appear larger, bolder, while the deep red lipstick turned her mouth into something dangerous, something she had only ever imagined in daydreams she quickly shut down. Behind the bathroom door, she could hear her twin coughing weakly from bed. Sophia had been working double shifts at the Velvet Room for weeks, living a life Emma barely understood, a life filled with rich men, whispered deals, and money that seemed to flow as easily as wine. Tonight, Sophia was too feverish to stand, her skin pale and clammy. Just this once, Emma had whispered to herself, pulling the dress from her sister's closet. Just one night of stepping into a world she had only ever seen in passing, curious and terrified in equal measure. She told herself she would only fill in, cover a shift, then slip back into her life of textbooks and lectures, nothing more. But as she slid her feet into Sophia's heels and felt her body lengthen, sharpen, transform, Emma sensed that she was stepping across an invisible line. The timid law student who spent nights memorizing case law was vanishing. In her place stood someone who could walk into fire. The Velvet Room lived up to its reputation the moment Emma pushed through its gilded doors. The air shimmered with perfume and ambition, with the faint tang of expensive liquor poured into crystal glasses. Music swelled, smooth, sensual jazz that seemed to curl around the chandeliers overhead, their light glittering across marble floors polished to a sheen. Men in tailored suits leaned too close to women in sequined gowns, laughter ringing like coins tossed into a fountain. Everything here gleamed with wealth, with secrets, with the kind of power Emma had only read about in the news. Her heels clicked nervously as she approached the hostess station. She prayed no one would notice how stiffly she carried herself, how her hands trembled as she adjusted the strap of her dress. She was supposed to be Sophia, confident, reckless, at ease in this decadent atmosphere. Instead, she felt like a child wearing a mask too big for her face. Monica, the manager greeted, a woman in a sharp black suit with an expression that revealed nothing and saw everything. She gave Emma a brisk once-over and nodded. "You're late. Judge Blackwood specifically asked for you tonight. He's waiting upstairs, Azure Suite." Emma's blood iced in her veins. Judge Blackwood. She knew that name, not from Sophia's whispered stories, but from her law textbooks. Daniel Blackwood, the youngest federal judge in state history. Brilliant, relentless, a man known for tearing apart corruption cases with a ferocity that left enemies ruined and allies wary. She had studied his rulings, admired his uncompromising logic, and silently dreamed of standing before him one day as a prosecutor. But to meet him like this, as Sophia, before Emma could protest, Monica was already guiding her through velvet curtains toward a private elevator. "He's tense tonight," Monica murmured. "Some big case has him wound too tight. You know how to handle him." Emma wanted to cry out that she didn't, that she had no idea what her sister normally said or did in these secret suites. But the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and she was propelled forward into a world she couldn't escape. The suite sprawled like a hidden kingdom above the city, floor-to-ceiling windows spilling light across leather and glass. The skyline glittered in the distance, indifferent and endless. A single man stood before the window, his back to her. His silhouette was tall, broad-shouldered, immaculately contained in a charcoal suit. His hand cradled a glass of amber scotch, the faint clink of ice punctuating the silence. "You're late," came the voice, low, commanding, every syllable edged with steel. Emma's breath caught, her pulse fluttering wildly. Even without turning, Judge Blackwood radiated authority. When he finally did, gray eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that seemed to strip her bare. The sharp jaw, the firm mouth, the faint disorder of his dark hair as though he had been pacing, pulling at it in frustration. All of it combined into a presence that made her knees weaken. He was devastating. More devastating than the photographs in her law journal had ever captured. And now those piercing eyes were fixed on her, studying, weighing. "I needed to clear my head," he said, his tone softer now, though still heavy with tension. The Peterson case is driving me mad. Evidence disappears. Witnesses change their stories. Someone is pulling the strings. He moved closer, the scent of cologne mingling with the smoky edge of whiskey. Emma struggled to find her voice, to mimic her sister's sultry confidence. "Sounds stressful," she whispered, hating how unsteady she sounded. Daniel's gaze sharpened, flickering with suspicion. "You seem different tonight, quieter. Usually you have plenty of opinions about my cases." Her heart pounded like a trapped bird, but even as panic clawed at her throat, a strange heat coursed through her veins. This man was danger, this man was temptation, and yet, instead of recoiling, Emma found herself drawn forward, her curiosity burning brighter than her fear. For the first time in her carefully sheltered life, she wanted to step off the edge, to see what happened if she let herself fall. Emma's pulse had not slowed since stepping into the suite, but when Daniel Blackwood finally crossed the space between them, the air itself seemed to thicken. Every step he took felt deliberate, measured, like a predator closing in on something unexpected yet compelling. His eyes never left hers, not once. It was as if he could sense her every lie, every hidden truth, peeling away layers she didn't even realize she had. "I've had people follow me," he said quietly, his voice pitched low, intimate. "Men in shadows. Cars idling too long near my house. I know someone wants me rattled before the Peterson trial." He took a drink from his glass, the amber liquid catching the city lights behind him. "But I don't rattle easily." Emma's throat tightened. She had read about the Peterson corruption scandal in her law journals, whispered rumors about city officials in bed with organized crime, prosecutors compromised, evidence disappearing into thin air. For weeks, her professors had used it as a case study on systemic rot in the justice system, and here she was, hearing it from the man himself. The way he said it, so calm, so certain, sent a chill crawling down her spine. He wasn't just a judge making rulings from afar. He was inside the storm, holding his ground while the world around him threatened to collapse. Daniel leaned closer, setting his glass aside. "But tonight, I wanted a distraction." His eyes dropped briefly to her lips before flicking back to her gaze. "I thought I knew exactly what kind of distraction you would be, and yet..." He trailed off, studying her face with such focus that Emma felt heat bloom across her skin. "There's something different." She swallowed hard, her mind racing for the right answer. If she tried to play Sophia too boldly, he would see through her in an instant. If she admitted the truth, that she was Emma, the quiet twin who spent her nights buried in case law, she risked everything. Her sister's job, her own future, this dangerous, exhilarating dance they'd already begun. So she gave him part of the truth wrapped in mystery. "Maybe I'm not the woman you expected me to be." Daniel chuckled softly, but there was no amusement in his eyes. "You're not," he agreed. "You're sharper, quieter, but sharper." His tone dropped even lower, velvet and steel entwined. "Tell me something then. If you weren't you, who would you want to be?" The question stunned her. No one had ever asked Emma that before. Not professors, not friends, not even Sophia. Her world had always been structured, disciplined, shaped by duty and ambition, but under Daniel's piercing gaze, her hate betrayed her. "Someone brave," she whispered. "Someone who isn't afraid to take risks." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then, with a swiftness that made her breath hitch, Daniel reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. The touch lingered, igniting sparks beneath her skin. "Careful, Emma," he murmured, and her heart nearly stopped at the sound of her real name on his lips, though she hadn't given it. "You might get what you wish for." Her body went rigid. Had she slipped? Had he known all along? But before she could speak, before panic could send her fleeing, Daniel leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. "You wear masks well," he said, his tone unreadable. "But tonight, I'd rather see the truth." The kiss, when it came, wasn't rushed or careless. It was devastatingly deliberate. His lips moved against hers with a hunger barely contained, and for the first time in her life, Emma felt herself unravel under the weight of raw, unfiltered desire. She clung to him, her hands fisting in his shirt as his warmth pressed against her, grounding her, consuming her. When they broke apart, both breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as though struggling to rein himself back in. "This is wrong," he whispered. "I shouldn't. You're too..." He cut himself off, pulling back just enough to study her again. His gaze was stormy, conflicted. "But I don't want to stop." Neither did she. The sound of his phone buzzing against the coffee table broke the spell. Daniel cursed under his breath, his jaw tightening as he answered. His voice shifted instantly, hard and clipped, discussing motions, evidence, missing witnesses. Emma stood frozen, the echo of his kiss still burning across her lips, her pulse still hammering. When he hung up, the storm in his eyes had deepened. He looked at her as though trying to memorize every detail of her face, as if unsure when or if he would see her again. "I have to go," he said, regret thick in his voice. Then, unexpectedly, he caught her hand, his thumb brushing her skin. "Will I?" The question struck her like lightning. "Will you what?" she asked softly. "Let me see you again." For one reckless, impossible moment, Emma thought of Sophia, of her law books, of the ordinary, safe life she had always lived. And then she thought of Daniel Blackwood's lips, of his eyes burning into hers, of the way her heart had never felt more alive than in this forbidden moment. "Yes," she whispered, before she could stop herself. Daniel's gray eyes darkened with relief, and something more dangerous. "Then be ready," he said, "because the storm around me isn't one you can step into lightly." As Emma walked back into the night, the city glittering below like a field of stars, she knew with terrifying certainty that her world had shifted forever. She had crossed a line she could never uncross. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear, beneath the trembling uncertainty, a voice whispered, "You wanted to be brave. Now you'll have to prove it." Emma hadn't slept in 3 days. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt Daniel's lips against hers, heard his voice in her ear, remembered the way his hand lingered on hers as though it belonged there. She tried drowning herself in case briefs, but even the thickest textbooks couldn't silence the echo of his kiss. Sophia, meanwhile, had bounced back from her fever and returned to her shifts at the Velvet Room, none the wiser about what Emma had done in her place. Still, Sophia occasionally eyed her with suspicion over breakfast. "You've been different lately," she muttered one morning, blowing steam off her coffee. "Glowing. Say almost." Emma buried her face in her mug. "I've just been studying harder." But deep down, she knew it wasn't studying. It was him. That afternoon, as she crossed the university quad with her notes clutched to her chest, Emma saw him, Daniel Blackwood, standing like a carved statue in front of the law library, his suit immaculate even under the pale sunlight, his hands tucked casually in his pockets as if he belonged there. He shouldn't have been there. He was too much, too powerful, too imposing for this place of restless students and hurried professors. And yet he seemed to command the space without saying a word. Her stomach dropped. For a heartbeat, she considered turning, disappearing into the crowd, pretending she hadn't seen him. But then his eyes locked on hers, those storm gray eyes that seemed to strip her bare every time they found her. He knew. She could feel it. He began walking toward her, each stride eating up the space between them. Students glanced up, some whispering. It wasn't every day a federal judge appeared on campus. Emma froze, her pulse roaring in her ears. "Emma Rodriguez," he said when he reached her, his voice quiet but sharp as a blade. Her blood ran cold. He knew her name, her real name. "I think you have me confused with someone else," she stammered, her mouth dry. Daniel's smile was thin, dangerous. "Senior at the university, criminal law focus. Planning to apply for the prosecutor's office, twin sister named Sophia who works at a club downtown. Should I go on?" Emma's heart hammered so hard she thought she might faint. How much did he know? How much had he uncovered? Grabbing his arm, she pulled him toward the shadowed steps of the library, away from the curious stares. His arm was solid beneath her fingers, heat radiating through the fabric of his suit. Even in her panic, she couldn't ignore the shiver it sent through her. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she whispered once they were out of earshot. "Sophia was sick, and I thought, I just wanted one night to feel something different. I never expected to meet you. I never expected what happened." His eyes searched hers, unrelenting, unreadable. "You're 22, he said finally, his voice low, rough. "A virgin, according to your sister's rather blunt description when I spoke to her." Emma's cheeks flamed with humiliation. "You spoke to Sophia?" "I had to understand who you were." His jaw tightened. "I thought you were playing some kind of game with me, but you weren't, were you?" She shook her head furiously. "No, I wasn't playing anything. I was just me. For the first time in my life, I was me." The storm in his eyes shifted, softened, though it didn't fade. He stepped closer, the air between them charged like the moment before a thunderclap. "And now that I know the truth," he murmured, "I want you even more." Her breath caught. It was madness, a federal judge confessing this in the shadows of a law school. But the way he said it, rough and raw, made her knees weak. "This is crazy," she whispered. "Completely insane," Daniel agreed, his lips brushing dangerously close to hers. I'm 15 years older than you. I'm a judge with enemies who would use you against me in an instant. This could ruin us both. His thumb traced her lower lip, making her tremble. But I can't stop thinking about you. Emma's pulse thundered in her ears. Every part of her screamed to run, to escape before she lost herself completely. And yet, she couldn't move. Not when his eyes held her like gravity itself. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely audible. Daniel studied her face for a long, breathless moment. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket, dragging him back to reality. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. I have to take this, he said, his voice clipped. But before stepping away, he leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. Meet me tonight, Meridian Hotel, 8 o'clock, room 1247. His voice dropped lower, rougher. If you don't come, I'll understand. But God, Emma. His eyes burned into hers. I really hope you do. Then he turned and walked away, his phone pressed to his ear, leaving Emma trembling against the cold stone of the library steps. She should walk away. She should bury herself in her textbooks, forget this ever happened, pretend she hadn't tasted the lips of a man whose name was carved into her law journals. But as the sun dipped low behind the buildings, Emma knew the truth. She couldn't walk away. She didn't want to. At 8 o'clock, she would be at room 1247, and whatever happened there would change everything. Emma melted into him, her hands clutching his shirt, pulling him closer as the kiss deepened, became hungrier. The world outside vanished. No law school, no courtroom, no secrets. Only his mouth on hers, his breath mingling with hers, the pounding rhythm of two hearts colliding. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against hers, his voice ragged. You terrify me. Emma blinked. Me? Why? Because I don't want to let you go. His admission hung between them like something fragile and unstoppable at once. She didn't want him to let go either. She wanted to be brave, to step into the unknown, to live outside the safety of her books and fears. And yet, even as she reached for him again, even as his lips trailed down her throat and set fire to her skin, a flicker of unease whispered at the back of her mind. A shadow, a chill. It wasn't until much later, when she left the hotel hours afterward, her body still humming with his touch, that she noticed it. A black sedan parked across the street, engine idling, no lights on. Her breath caught. For a moment she thought it was coincidence, but as she turned down the block, the car rolled forward slowly, deliberately, keeping pace. Emma quickened her steps, her heart slamming against her ribs. She reached the corner, ducked into a more crowded street, and only then glanced back. The sedan had vanished, but the sense of eyes watching her lingered, cold and unshakable. Emma knew then what Daniel had warned her. Stepping into his world meant stepping into danger, and tonight was only the beginning. Emma couldn't shake the image of that black sedan from her mind. It haunted her every step, a phantom in her periphery. She told herself it was paranoia, that she was just jumpy after the hotel. But the next day the car appeared again, waiting at the far end of her street when she left for class, appearing around the corner when she tried to take a different route. Daniel's words echoed in her memory. The storm around me isn't one you can step into lightly. For the first time, she understood exactly what he meant. 2 days later, she was leaving the campus parking garage when she heard heels striking the concrete behind her. Not hurried, not hesitant, deliberate. Emma turned, her breath catching. A woman approached, tall, elegant, sharp as glass. Platinum blonde hair twisted into a severe knot, an expensive navy coat falling to her knees. Her eyes were a chilling, icy blue, and her lips curved into the kind of smile that promised nothing good. Emma Rodriguez, the woman said, her voice smooth as silk but edged with steel. I've been looking for you. Emma froze, her grip tightening on her bag. Do I know you? The woman's smile widened, predatory. Rachel Sterling, District Attorney's Office. She held out a card, but her tone made it clear this wasn't a friendly introduction. We need to talk. About Judge Blackwood. The name alone made Emma's pulse spike. What about him? Rachel gestured toward the exit. There's a coffee shop across the street, more private than a parking garage, unless you'd prefer I ask my questions out here, where anyone might overhear. Every instinct screamed danger, but Emma's feet carried her forward anyway, curiosity and fear tangling in her chest. Inside the cafe, Rachel ordered 2 coffees and slid into a corner booth, her posture perfect, her eyes never leaving Emma. The moment the barista retreated, Rachel leaned in. "We know about your relationship with Judge Blackwood," she said without preamble. Emma's stomach dropped. "That's not... Don't bother denying it." Rachel's tone cut sharp as a knife. "You've been seen with him. We also know he's been... careless. Sharing information about the Peterson case with you, evidence, witness names, strategy." Emma shook her head, panic rising. "That's not true. He wouldn't..." Rachel's hand shot out, gripping Emma's wrist with startling strength. Her nails pressed into Emma's skin. "Listen to me, little girl. Men like him don't ruin their careers over women like you unless they're getting something in return. So why don't we stop pretending?" Emma's breath came shallow, her heart slamming. She tried to pull her hand free, but Rachel tightened her grip, her icy eyes boring into hers. "What do you want?" Emma whispered. Rachel's smile returned, cold and triumphant. "Information, everything Judge Blackwood has uncovered about Victor Kane. His files, his theories, his timeline. In exchange, we keep your sordid little affair out of the papers." The name hit Emma like a blow. Victor Kane, the ambitious prosecutor at the center of the Peterson case. She had read about him in law articles, brilliant, ruthless, untouchable. If Daniel was investigating him, no wonder powerful people were circling like vultures. "I don't know anything about an investigation," Emma said, forcing her voice steady. Rachel's expression hardened. "If you won't help me, perhaps your sister Sophia will. Imagine what the press will do with that story. The federal judge entangled with twin escorts." The blood drained from Emma's face. The threat was clear. Her life, Sophia's life, Daniel's career, all of it balanced on the edge of this woman's smile. Rachel slid her card across the table. "You have 24 hours. Call me by tomorrow night or this becomes very public." Then she rose, calm and precise, and left Emma trembling in the booth. That night, Emma sat awake, Rachel's threats ringing in her ears. Every option felt like a trap. If she betrayed Daniel, she destroyed him. If she stayed silent, Rachel would ruin them anyway. She wanted to call him, to confess everything, but Rachel's warning held her back. "We'll know if you do." She could still feel Rachel's grip bruising her wrist, a phantom reminder of just how powerless she was, except maybe she wasn't. Emma wasn't Sophia. She wasn't reckless, but she wasn't helpless either. She had spent her life studying justice, believing in its weight, its worth, and maybe it was time to stop hiding behind her books and step into the fight. The next morning, she made her decision. Instead of calling Rachel Sterling, Emma dialed another number, the local FBI field office. Agent Maria Santos met her that afternoon in a secured downtown building, the blinds drawn tight, a small recorder blinking between them. Santos was sharp-eyed, no nonsense, but there was something reassuring in her presence. "Judge Blackwood doesn't know you're here?" Santos asked after listening to Emma's account. Emma shook her head. "I couldn't risk it. Rachel said they're watching me." Santos leaned back, steepling her fingers. "Victor Kane is dangerous. We've been building a case against him for months, but he covers his tracks well. What you've given us is confirmation he's getting desperate." Emma's throat tightened. "So what do you need from me?" Santos's gaze was steady. "Evidence. If you're willing, we'd like you to meet Rachel again, but this time wearing a wire. We'll be monitoring everything. You'd be under full protection." Emma's heart pounded. "You want me to spy on them?" "We want you to help us catch them in their own words. It's risky, yes, but with Kane's network unraveling, this could be the break we need." Emma thought of Daniel, of the weight he carried, the storm he faced, the way he had told her she was braver than she knew. If there was a chance to protect him, to protect the justice he fought for, how could she refuse? Her hands shook as she nodded. "I'll do it." Agent Santos slid a small device across the table. "Then let's get to work." For the first time in her life, Emma Rodriguez wasn't just studying the law. She was about to put her life on the line for it. And she knew deep in her bones that there was no turning back. Emma sat in the corner booth of the same cafe where Rachel Sterling had first cornered her, her heart pounding so violently she was sure anyone walking past could hear it. Beneath her blouse, taped against her skin, the wire itched. Every movement made her aware of it. Every breath felt louder than it should have been. Agent Santos's words echoed in her head. "We'll have people in the cafe, in the cars outside, on the roof across the street. You won't be alone." And yet, Emma had never felt more alone. Her hands wrapped around the coffee cup in front of her, the steam curling upward, hiding the faint tremor in her fingers. The bell above the cafe door jingled, and Rachel Sterling walked in as if she owned the place. Crisp, navy suit, cold blue eyes. her confidence slicing through the room like a blade. "Miss Rodriguez?" Rachel said smoothly, sliding into the booth across from her. "I was beginning to think you weren't brave enough to show." Emma forced herself to meet her gaze, her voice steadier than she felt. "I said I'd think about your offer. I'm here, aren't I?" Rachel studied her for a beat, then smirked. "Fair point. So tell me, have you decided to be useful?" Emma leaned back, as if considering. "If I'm going to betray Daniel Blackwood, I want more than silence. I want money, and I want to meet Kane myself." Rachel's eyebrows flicked up, surprise breaking through her cool mask. "Ambitious, aren't we?" She tapped a manicured nail against her cup. "Kane doesn't usually meet assets, but perhaps you're worth the exception." Emma's pulse throbbed in her ears, but she kept her face calm. "If I'm going to risk everything, I want to know who I'm working for. Otherwise, no deal." Rachel studied her again, icy eyes narrowing. Then, with a small smile, she pulled out her phone. "You might be more interesting than I gave you credit for." 2 nights later, Emma stood in the penthouse office of Kane Industries, her entire body wired with tension. The room was as she'd imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows with a sweeping view of the city, polished mahogany furniture, expensive art that screamed power and permanence. And then there was Victor Kane. Silver-haired, perfectly tailored, with the kind of controlled authority that made every word feel dangerous. He didn't bother to stand when Emma entered, merely gestured to the chair across from his desk. His eyes were sharp, calculating, a predator assessing prey. "So," he said, his voice deep, deliberate, "you're the young woman who has Judge Blackwood so distracted." Emma sat without asking permission, projecting confidence she didn't feel. "Rachel tells me you want information." "I want loyalty," Kane corrected, his tone silk over steel. "Information is just how you prove it." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Tell me what Blackwood has on me." Emma's heart thudded painfully, the wire under her blouse recording every word. She forced herself to meet his eyes. "He's building a pattern, financial records, witness statements that disappeared, cases you pushed that conveniently fell apart. He's going to hand it all to the federal prosecutor next week." For a flicker of a moment, Kane's composure cracked, his jaw tightened, his eyes darkened. Then he laughed softly, but it was the kind of laugh that promised nothing good. How unfortunate for the good judge. Emma leaned forward. "So what are you going to do about it?" Kane's smile was slow, reptilian. "What I always do. Remove obstacles, permanently, if necessary." He rose from his chair, walking to the window, his reflection cold and inhuman eye on the glass. "But Blackwood is high profile. Killing him would draw too many eyes. No, better to arrange an accident, something that leaves him alive but unable to continue his investigation." Emma's blood ran cold, though she forced herself not to flinch. "You mean hurt him?" "I mean neutralize him," Kane corrected smoothly. He turned, his eyes locking on hers. "The question is, Miss Rodriguez, will you help us? Or are you part of the problem?" Before Emma could answer, the office door burst open. "FBI, don't move!" Agents flooded the room, weapons drawn, their shouts echoing against the glass and marble. Rachel Sterling cursed as she was shoved to the floor in handcuffs. Kane's eyes went wide for the first time, rage twisting his face. "You stupid little," he snarled at Emma as 2 agents forced his arms behind his back. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Emma stood, her legs trembling but her voice clear. "I've done what Judge Blackwood taught me. I chose justice over fear." Kane spat curses as the agents dragged him out, his threats echoing through the hallway. The moment the chaos cleared, Agent Santos appeared at Emma's side, her expression equal parts relief and admiration. "You did perfectly. You got him to incriminate himself on 6 counts. We have everything we need." Emma let out a shaky breath, her knees threatening to give way, but before she could collapse, the door opened again. Daniel. His face was pale, his eyes wild with fear. The moment he saw her, safe and standing, he crossed the room in 3 long strides, pulling her into his arms. His embrace was fierce, desperate, his heartbeat thunderous against her ear. "What were you thinking?" His voice was ragged, his hands trembling as they framed her face. "You could have been killed." Emma's eyes stung with tears, but she held his gaze. "I was thinking someone had to stop them, and I was thinking of you. You told me to be brave. I was." For a moment, Daniel just stared at her, his eyes stormy and full of things he hadn't said. Then slowly his expression broke. Vulnerability bled through the iron. His thumb brushed her cheek. "You're the bravest person I know," he whispered. But God help me, Emma, promise me you'll never take a risk like that again. Her lips curved into a faint, trembling smile. Only if you promise to stop trying to protect me from everything. We're partners now. Remember? Something in him shattered at that, and before she could take another breath, his lips were on hers. The kiss was fierce, urgent, filled with all the fear and relief and love he'd been holding back. When they finally broke apart, Daniel rested his forehead against hers, his voice raw. I love you. The words stunned her, more shocking than any gun, any threat, any conspiracy. Her heart raced, but her answer came as naturally as breathing. I love you too. The agents bustled around them, Kane's threats fading down the hallway, but in that moment none of it mattered. For Emma, there was only Daniel, the man who had once been untouchable, unreachable, but who now looked at her as if she were his anchor in the storm. And she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that their story was only beginning.